In the dead of winter, 1959, deep within the isolated Ural Mountains of Russia, 9 experienced hikers set out on a journey into the unknown. Their spirits high and their goal clear. Yet only weeks later, their lifeless bodies were discovered scattered in bizarre and chilling circumstances that would spark one of the most perplexing and enduring mysteries of the 20th century. What could have happened on that mountain slope to drive these experienced young hikers into such terror? This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. Our story begins in January of 1959 with a group of 10 hikers, all students and recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. They were led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student who was known for his meticulous planning and leadership. The group consisted of 8 men and 2 women, and each member was experienced in mountaineering and familiar with the harsh winters of Russia. Most were young, in their early 20s, driven by a love for adventure and the thrill of exploration. Their planned journey was an ambitious one. They aimed to reach a remote mountain called Otorten. Interestingly, the name Otorten means "don't go there" in the language of the local Mansi people. Despite the ominous name, the group didn't hesitate. They saw this as an exhilarating challenge. The conditions they would face, frigid temperatures and unpredictable terrain, were something they had trained for, and they were confident in their abilities. Over the next few days, the hikers would journal their journey, describing moments of laughter, camaraderie, and resilience. But soon, the group would face conditions that no training or planning could prepare them for. On February 1st, they reached the slopes of a mountain named Kholat Syakhl, or Dead Mountain in Mansi. For reasons that remain unclear, they decided to set up their camp here, on an exposed slope, rather than the more sheltered area nearby. Perhaps they wanted to make an early start the next day, or maybe they were simply tired after a long day of trekking. Whatever their reasons, this would be their last camp. February 12th was the date the group was expected to return and send word to their friends and family. But as days passed without any communication, concern began to grow among their loved ones. At first, people assumed they'd been delayed by bad weather, a common occurrence in the mountains. But when days turned into weeks, their absence became impossible to ignore. On February 20th, a search party was finally dispatched. The initial search teams found nothing, and it wasn't until February 26th that rescuers stumbled upon the hikers' campsite. What they discovered there shocked everyone. The tent, half buried in snow, appeared to have been slashed open from the inside. Personal belongings, food supplies, and even clothing were scattered inside, as though the group had left in a hurry. There were footprints leading away from the tent, but what was truly disturbing was that most of the footprints were barefoot or made by people wearing socks. The trail of footprints led down toward the edge of a forest, and there, underneath a large cedar tree, the searchers made their first discovery: the bodies of 2 of the hikers. Both were found with very little clothing, barefoot, and only in their undergarments, as if they had fled into the cold in a moment of blind terror. What could have driven them to abandon the shelter of their tent and dash into freezing temperatures without proper clothing? As searchers looked further, 3 more bodies were found scattered across the snow between the tent and the cedar tree. Among them was Igor Dyatlov himself. They seemed to have been trying to make their way back to the tent, but they, too, wore minimal clothing and showed signs of hypothermia. All appeared to have succumbed to the brutal cold. But the most disturbing part of this mystery was yet to come. Nearly 2 months later, as the snow began to melt, searchers uncovered the last 4 bodies in a ravine further into the forest. These hikers were different. They had suffered traumatic injuries. One had a fractured skull, while 2 others had severe chest injuries described as similar to being hit by a car. And yet, these internal injuries left no visible external wounds. Moreover, the bodies showed other strange details. Some had their skin discolored in an odd shade of brownish orange, and traces of radiation were later detected on their clothing. What could have caused these injuries? How could such experienced hikers end up in such a vulnerable state? Since 1959, theories have flooded in to explain the Dyatlov Pass incident. Each theory tries to make sense of these baffling clues, but none offer a perfect answer. One popular explanation is an avalanche. It's believed the hikers might have slashed their tent to escape a sudden slide of snow, panicking and abandoning their belongings. But this theory doesn't explain the internal injuries or why some bodies showed signs of radiation. Another idea is paradoxical undressing, a phenomenon where hypothermic individuals feel an intense burning sensation, causing them to undress. While this could explain why they were found with so little clothing, it still doesn't answer why they left the tent in the first place. Hypothermia alone doesn't explain their massive internal injuries. Then, there are theories that suggest something more unnatural or even supernatural. Some people point to the presence of orange orbs reportedly seen in the sky that night by other hikers miles away. Could there have been secret military tests happening nearby? Perhaps an explosion or a shockwave? The radiation traces found on the clothing only fuel these speculations. In 2020, after over 6 decades of theories and speculation, the Russian government officially reopened the investigation. Their conclusion pointed once again to a natural force, specifically an avalanche. But to this day, many experts and enthusiasts argue that the evidence simply doesn't fit the avalanche theory. Many questions linger. Why did the hikers set up camp on an exposed slope, a decision that was unusual for such experienced mountaineers? What caused them to flee so suddenly without essential survival gear? And how could the bodies display such mysterious injuries without any external damage? So, what happened to the Dyatlov group that night on the slopes of Dead Mountain? Was it a natural disaster, a misjudgment, or something far more mysterious? Decades later, the mountain remains silent, leaving us to puzzle over the fragments of evidence and ask ourselves, what could have driven 9 skilled hikers to their deaths in such a haunting way? Let us know what you think. Do you believe the avalanche theory, or does the evidence suggest something else? A government cover-up, paranormal forces, or an unsolved tragedy frozen in time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your theories on this enduring mystery.